Hey guys, it's Carpenter review for The Hate U Give. And what The Hate U Give is essentially about is we center on the character of Star Carter, and she is someone who is kind of living two very different lives. In one hand, she lives in this town that is very much overwrought by gang violence, but it also is predominantly black. However, she gets to escape that when she goes to school, which is this very prestigious prep school that is predominantly white, and for the most part, she seems to be handling things well. However, this is quickly upended by the arrival of her best friend Khalil. He is now finally, he is on the path to graduating, and one night after a party, he is pulled over and quickly gunned down by a white cop for simply holding a hairbrush. And quickly after this, the lines between these two lives start to blur for Star, and Star wants to do whatever she can to make sure that, the justice is brought to Khalil's death, and that the action is being taken that isn't really, happening, and that's really all I'm going to say. So The Hate U Give, I'm going to be honest, I was kind of dreading this movie. This movie looked really dumb to me. And look, I have no problem with movies of this nature, but this just looked like a very repetitive film. I have seen so many films this year that deal with this idea of police brutality and deal with the Black Lives Matter movement. And this one seemed like it was going to be very blatant. It seemed like it was going to be very in your face, and it wasn't going to be very subtle about it. And it just didn't look very well put together, and I really wasn't looking forward to it at all. However, to my surprise, not only is The Hate U Give completely different than the trailers ended up being, but it is actually, I think, one of the most important movies of the entire year. I really love The Hate U Give a lot, and we're just getting to right now, starting off with the cast. And I'll say right now, again, I was not very confident about most of the actors that were casted here, but I think really everyone did a tremendous job, particularly Amandla Stenberg as our main character Star, who gives a very ferocious and emotional performance, and you see that from the moments that Star is first on screen. You see that she really is trying to keep these two lives together. She seems to be okay, but once Khalil is killed, there's just this sense that, she really is starting to go down a down spiral, and you can see, the real pain and just the real anger in her. There's a lot of things that she wants to happen that just aren't being done, and she really feels like she's the one to do something about it, and you're just waiting for her to explode. And Stenberg plays this in such a very realistic and nuanced manner, and I really love what she did here. I like Stenberg and other things I've seen her in, but she took this to a whole other level. I was very impressed by her in this film. We're definitely going to be seeing more of her after this, and I have vastly underestimated her because I absolutely loved what she did here. It is definitely, I think, one of the most realistic performances I've ever seen, but also one of the most emotional performances I have seen all year for sure. I really loved what she did here. I don't know if Oscar consideration is in the question, but she definitely does deserve it because I really do think she went all out here. This was for sure a career best performance from her. However, someone else that I don't think is being talked about enough is Russell Hornsby as Star's father, who I loved in this movie. I mean, this is someone who, he really is trying to keep his family together. You can see that he just wants them to be a normal family, but he is very much involved with the gang violence in the town, and he's doing his best to protect his family, and the relationship between him and Star, I thought was very well done, but the thing that impressed me most is just the levels that Hornsby's character goes as a character. There is a fantastic scene with him where he is, you can tell he is willing to do whatever he can to protect his family, and there is this one particular scene with him that I just thought he acted the hell out of, and I've really loved what he was able to do here. I thought he was just incredible. I've never really been that impressed by him as an actor, but he kind of blew me away here, and I don't think he's being talked about enough. Again, I don't know if supporting actor is he's in talks for it, but he absolutely should be, because I really do think he killed it here. As far as the rest of the cast goes, everyone really does do a tremendous job. Regina Hall, I thought, was very well casted as Star's mother, who really is trying to stay calm. She's the one who really is doing whatever she can to try to get them out of this gang violence. She's constantly threatening them moving and things like that. She really is not happy by the constant spree that the town seems to find itself trapped in, and I really thought she was very good here. I liked Star's brother as well. I thought he was really great. Common, of course, is very good here. Anthony Mackie. KJ Apa, I will say, I thought he was very good here. He's very on and off with me in Riverdale, but I did actually think he was pretty good here. I liked what he did in this film. And then someone else that I'm very happy to say was very good here is Sabrina Carpenter. I was worried at first that Sabrina Carpenter was picking a really bad role, but I really loved where they end up going with her character in this film. It is not what you may expect, and in some ways she is very much kind of a secondary antagonist, but I think they took her in a direction that felt very real, and I'm very happy to see Carpenter is getting very successful roles after Girl Meets World. I think she was such a talent on that show, and I'm very happy to see that is translating over to film, at least so far. Like I said, I really think everyone did a great job here. There really wasn't a single actor that I don't think was on their A game, and that is definitely something I will give this film. And really the entire family overall, you really do find yourself getting wrapped up in, and that really is due to everyone's chemistry. I think everyone really did a great job here. They really do feel like a real family, and especially when shit does go down in that third act, you really are locked into that story, and you're really hoping that they can maintain that semblance of normalcy, and I think that was just really well exhibited here by all the actors here, who, like I said, I thought were all very well casted in this film. But now I really want to get to the directing and the writing, because like I said, that was my biggest fear going into it. I wasn't necessarily the acting, which I didn't really think looked all that great, but the directing was the thing I was the most worried about, because I was worried that George Tillman Jr. wasn't going to be the right director to handle this kind of material, something so sensitive, something that is very complex. I didn't think he was going to cover all the avenues. It seemed like he was going to be very one-sided on the issue, and he's really not. In fact, this film feels very real in the sense with the way it's directed. I mean, the way the film starts off, you know something is going to happen, but it pretty much is a normal day, and all of a sudden this one event happens and things just escalate further and further, and I really loved his directing here. I think he did it in a very patient manner in that sense, because again, you're waiting for things to go off the rails, but for a while, it's very calm, and I thought he did a good job with that. And the dramatic moments of this movie, they don't really feel heavy-handed. You can understand why these characters are feeling this way, and what's really going on with them, and I think he did a very good job with it overall. But he also did throw in some shades of comedy, which I was actually very surprised about. The comedy isn't as consistent as the drama, because this is a very sad movie for sure, but there is actually some really well-timed comedy, and I did enjoy it a lot. I thought there were some fun moments in this movie, and I thought his directing overall was really great. Again, I was worried that he was not going to handle this material correctly, but I really do think he did a pretty great job here. Now, when talking about the writing, it is very bittersweet because, unfortunately, the writer here, Audrey Wells, did pass away, but what a final film to end her career on. I mean, sure, unbeknownst to her, this was, in fact, her final film. She had no idea when writing it, but she really did go out with a bang here because I thought the script here was so well done. Again, the thing I was most worried about with this movie is that it was going to be very just one-sided and very much focusing on just this one issue. And if you watch the trailer, you very much think, oh, the movie's just about Khalil's death. It's actually not. That's one of the big parts of the movie for sure, and that is something that you can see very much does plague Star's sense of self, where she really does want something to be done and for this cop to be brought to justice, but that's not the message the movie is trying to throw. Sure, you can make parallels to the Black Lives Matter movement, but what the movie is really trying to bring up is the idea of hate. There's so much hate being thrown within this town, and we need someone like Star, who is a beacon of hope, to really move forward and try to put a stop to it, and I think that really was the right message here, especially when it comes to the gang element. I was not expecting this film to dive as much as it did into this gang, but they really do a good job of setting it up. There is the first scene in this movie, right off the bat, you know that they're not playing around when it comes to this gang. I mean, we get into this idea that there's always crime going on, and the police are constantly on Overwatch here. They're constantly on standby because they pretty much think that anyone, is tied to this gang. And you can't really blame them for thinking that because of the things that do go on in this film. And because of that, you really do get that sense of urgency. You also really do agree. They also, I think, do a very But they also do a very good job of setting up this family. You know, we get into this conflict where, like I said, they're constantly being upended by this violence. You know, they're trying to do what they can to, you know, just be a normal family, but it's always being ruined, and they always have to be wary of what they're able to do. I mean, there's certain information, you know, in the very beginning of this movie, we realize that there is certain information that Star has that she cannot give out, or else the gang is going to go after her family. And it becomes a very compelling story. I actually cared about that even more than I did with Khalil. I still cared about Khalil a lot. They do a good job of getting you invested in who Khalil really was, but I thought the gang violence was also very well represented here. They really did a great job of showing what would happen in this type of situation, and I was very impressed by the way that was done. You know, again, it could have been something that was kind of cheesy, was heavy-handed, but the fact that it wasn't made it that much more impressive, and I really love what they were able to get out of it, because, like I said, there are some very intense scenes in this film for sure, and some of the gang violence, I was surprised by how heavily they did lean on it, but I did, you know, it never came from a place where it felt like they were trying to trivialize or even worse, romanticize what was really happening. They really do dive deep into what's going on in the problems of this gang, and I thought that was very well done here. But of course, you know, the main thing going on in this movie is the whole situation with Khalil, and I thought that also was very well brought up, because they do a very good job in presenting both sides. Sure, there is the side that this cop, you know, he should have been more alert. He should have been more on his job. He didn't know what he was, you know, he didn't know what he was doing. It was simply just a hairbrush, and they do a good job of showing that Khalil was a kid who pretty much had a whole life ahead of him, and he tried to steer away from that violence. But they also show the side that is justifying the cop, saying that, you know, he did right. And the most surprising thing about this is who it comes from. It comes from two people. Now, one is Sabrina Carpenter, who the arc that she does go through I thought was very interesting. The conflict that her and Star have, I thought was one of the most interesting parts of the movie, but also Common. Common's character is a cop, so he has the mentality of what cops do normally go through, and I think the film did a good job in not trying to villainize that side of things. Sure, you know, the film does try to, you know, make the other, it presents both sides. They definitely do show which side is correct and which side we should follow and which side, you know, we should be on in this movie, but they don't try to just nix out the other side of this movie. They do a good job in showing that there are people that are going to feel for this cop. There are people that are going to feel for his family, and I thought that was also very well written in that sense. It felt very real, and there were many conversations that Star has with her relatives or her friends that I thought was very realistic. And again, you can make various parallels to other situations that have come up, like, for example, Trayvon Martin or Michael Brown or something like that. The movie is trying to kind of be its own version of that, but again, it's a much more complex situation than that, and I really enjoyed that a lot. Again, I think they did a very good job with really just getting us into this story and not trying to make it too heavy-handed, and I was, again, very impressed by that a lot. The film also gives you a very good reason to care about Khalil. Not just the fact that this was a kid that had a whole life ahead of him. There's a very good reason why Star is so broken up over this. It's not just because she witnessed Khalil die. There's a much bigger reason that I'm not going to say, because I feel like it's something where if you find out, it ruins the emotional impact that the movie has, but I was really surprised with where they went with it. I was not expecting them to go in this direction, but again, this is a very dark story, and particularly this one, you know, this one plot twist that came up, I was like, holy shit, I couldn't believe the movie actually went into that dark of territory, but they really did, and again, I was very happy that they ended up doing that. Like I said, for the most part, I think the writing is really great here. Also, the way in which this film handles protests is excellent. I mean, again, it felt shockingly real the way it was done. I was very surprised with what they were able to do, especially the third act of this movie. It gets absolutely insane, and there is one specific scene where I was honestly on the edge of my seat, and I couldn't believe how real it was really getting. It felt like something where I could just turn on the news and I would see a very similar protest going on. I understand people don't want to see, you know, they don't want to see real life echoed into film, but it was very impressive impressive in the sense where how much this film understood it, how much this film was able to accurately portray this type of situation. And again, I was just really happy with the way that went down, especially when it comes to Issa Rae's character. She plays a big part in the protest stuff, and I really loved the way that was handled.
Also, for those who are worried about the title of the film, it's really not what you think. The title of the film is actually based on this acronym that Star's father happens to have tattooed. And without really getting into much, the acronym pretty much sums up the entire message of the movie. And I think if it was removed, this film would not be nearly as impactful as it really was. I mean, there's genuine reasons why that is the tattoo he has, why he named his kid Star, all that stuff is actually really interesting, way more than I expected it to be. And again, just the attention to detail that was put in this film just really stuck out to me. And again, is one of the many reasons why I think it is as great as it truly is.
That being said, there is one issue I do have with the writing, and that is because most of these characters are very well developed. There's a lot of characters that I really loved here a lot. Like I said, I really thought the family worked very well together. I thought Sabrina Carpenter's character was well written. There's really only one character I wasn't a fan of that I just thought was a little underwritten, and I'll just say right now, it's KJ Appa's character. And it's not so much the character, because I do understand his purpose in the film. He is Star's boyfriend, and he's someone who he's very inclusive. He doesn't really see color and things like that, and he very much is on her side. My issue with the film is that he's just a bit too good of a character, in the sense where he never seems to be on the wrong side of things. He just seems to be the perfect guy, and the guy that is always doing the right thing, and the guy that is just always on top of things and always has the right thing to say. And I understand that they're trying to use him as, this is someone who is white but agrees with what Star is doing and doesn't see color in that way. And, I totally do understand that for sure. My issue with the movie is that I just wish that they, would have given him a little bit more as a character. He does not really, is not really that compelling of a character, despite the fact that Appa and Stenberg do work well together. I just felt that they could have done a lot, more with him as a character. And anytime he came in the movie, I still enjoyed it, but I was just like, oh, these characters are so well written. And then there's just KJ Appa's character, who I think could have given a little bit more layers to, and I do think that was a bit of a missed opportunity there. Also, I will say, I understand this film is based on a book, but there are some instances where the narration in this film, it feels a little heavy-handed. It feels like the film is sometimes speaking to you a little bit of, this is how you're supposed to feel. Particularly one scene in the third act, which I thought was very powerful and I really loved a lot, was almost ruined by this narration. Again, I really loved the scene and I was really getting into it and I thought it was very intense, but the narration, it's like, okay, I understand what you're trying to say. You don't need this narration here. And I did think they relied a little too much on it at points. Not a lot. There's definitely enough points where they are very subtle and they don't try to talk down to you in that way. But there was one instance in the film where I did think they just relied a little too heavily on it, and I think that definitely was a mistake here. Something that I really love about this film is the cinematography. The cinematography is some of the most brilliant I have seen all year, not just in terms of the way shots are done, because sure, that's well done, but the thing that really sticks out to me are the color palettes in this film. And this is something that I did not notice at first, but I've heard from other people, and yeah, it's really well done, where if you look in the film, whenever Star is in her regular neighborhood, it's very bright, and you get this sense of you get this sense of realism. It looks like everything just feels real in that way. However, when she's in the private school where she is kind of hiding her true self, things are very cold. Things feel very overly blue and opaque, and I really love the stark contrast in those two. I thought that was really cool the way they did that, and I think it said a lot about this movie, because again, these two places, while they're not that different, they are different for Star. She acts differently in both in both areas, and I really did love getting into that. I think, again, the way the cinematography really did play a part in Star's characterization in that way, I just thought was really brilliant, and that's when you know you have a brilliant filmmaker on your hands. I was very impressed by that. The score as well, I thought was really great here. I thought definitely it was a very powerful score, and the editing, I thought this film was extremely well paced. There really wasn't any point where it did drag for me. I think they did a very good job with setting up, and if you're worried, the actual event doesn't, really goes down like very quickly. It's like the first 20 or 30 minutes of the movie, and the rest of the movie is really the aftermath and how they deal with it. And I think they did a good job in not really wasting any time. Sure, like I said, the film takes its time in developing the family and things like that, but the film is also not trying to bore you. It knows that it knows that you want to get into the interesting stuff, but it also tries to make you forget it's going to happen, and I think it's that much more effective in the way. Overall, it's just one of the most well-paced films I've seen all year for the most part. Really, guys, The Hate U Give surprised me in so many ways. I expected this film, like I said, to be so one-note and beating you over the head constantly, and it is anything but that. This is a very important film about the hate that is constantly in our lives, and the hate that really just upends everything that we want, and we need to prevail as a society. It's not just a film about Black Lives Matter. It really is a film just centering on the idea of hate in general. There's so much hate going on within the world. You constantly see all these hateful comments, and you rarely see someone with a positive attitude, and that is something that Star tries to exude in this film. And I think this film, it's trying to make you be like Star. It's trying to say that we all need a star, someone to really move us forward, and I think this film does a very good job in telling the story. It's a film that I know some aren't going to see because of the trailer, but if you haven't seen the trailer, don't watch it. Seriously, go into this movie as cold as possible because it is much different than the trailers do really make it out to be. It has some of the best performances of the year from Hornsby and Stenberg. It has a really meaty story, much more than I really did expect it to be. It has a story that I think is very relevant. It brings up some issues, and it's really not heavy-handed with it. It's very dramatic. It's also very fun at times. It really does have everything I think that it needed to be great, and much better than I ever could have expected it to be. I expected this film to, hearing the rave reviews and things like that, I expected this film to maybe surprise me a little bit, but I did not expect for me to come out here and say that The Hate U Give is probably one of the best movies I have seen so far this year. And with that being said, I am definitely going to give The Hate U Give an A. Seriously, guys, I don't know what's going on this year, but this is easily the most surprising movie I have seen all year. I really thought this was going to be everything wrong with these kinds of movies, but if anything, it shows why these kinds of movies are thriving and why they're so important and why I think so many people need to go out and see them, and I think it was just very well handled overall. But that's really it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed. The most guys saw this one overall, left your thoughts in it. We'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.